Seafarer for today. I've got the Old English version on my phone because I'll probably make some references to it. The Seafarer and the Wanderer are, I won't say often, sometimes they're read as companion pieces, okay? They're not companion pieces in the manuscript. That is, they're not back to back. There's intervening material. If I remember right, there's riddles between them. Loser might say in the introduction, but I'm not positive. But they don't appear right next to each other, which you kind of think they would if they're supposed to be companion pieces. Okay? The Seafarer, kind of generally speaking, the Seafarer has a much more overt Christian message than does the Wanderer. Up until about, 20, 30 years ago, Old English scholars or Anglo-Saxon scholars kind of celebrated, let's say, the Wanderer a little bit more than the Seafarer because it was thought, there's some good, kind of pagan Germanic ideology in the Wanderer. Except for the Christian stuff. If we can just remove the Christian stuff, then we have this good kind of pagan Germanic poem. As I said the other day, I don't think you can remove the Christian stuff because it's woven into the very text, as it were. The Seafarer, you can't remove the Christian text. I mean, if you remove the Christian stuff from the Seafarer, you end up, let me kind of mix metaphors here a little bit, with Thomas Jefferson's version of the Bible, which is, a very slim book because he takes out all the miracles. He takes out all the references to supernatural events. So you pretty much throw away a lot of the Old Testament, and Jesus is just kind of a nice guy, okay? So look how it begins. Don't go to sleep. The Old English begins. Hold on, I gotta blow this up so I can read it. Me ich be me silvum sodia reckon sida sedgen, hu ich je swink dagum ervathwila oft frauda, bitra breastkara je bieden habe, je kuner in chiela, kersa de fela, atul either je welch, fern mech oft beat, narrow nicht wacko, at nacken stevnan, thone be cliffum knosseth. Okay? That is, I can sing a true song of myself. Okay? Not just a song, a true song. So there's going to be autobiography here, but it's not, kind of fictionalized, I'm blowing up my autobiography, so to speak. Tell of my journeys. Okay? The journeys is the Sithis that he's talking about. I can sing a true song of myself, tell of my journeys, how in days of toil, that's the Old English word yiswink dagum. Yiswink means toil, dagum, days. How in days of toil, I've often suffered troubled times. Now, what was one of the things that the Wanderer tried to get across? What is life like? Here, sucks, crappy, It's hard. It's not full of joy necessarily. That's what this speaker is talking about. He's not talking about in days of toil, last Saturday when I worked really hard out in the yard. Days of toil means life. Okay? How in days of toil, I've often suffered troubled times, endured hard heartache, come to know many of care's dwellings on the keel of a ship. Like the Wanderer, okay? He's talking about life in a boat, okay? And it could be because for Christian Anglo-Saxons, the boat is a metaphor for life, okay? It's not an accident, for example, that if you are a churchgoer, if your church has any sense of tradition, okay, which is asking a lot for modern age. But if you go to a church, there aren't many shaped like this anymore, that is shaped like this, shaped like a cross, it has a cruciform shape, Okay? This is a transept, this is a transept, this is, no, this is the altar area. There's another word for it, and it just completely slipped my mind. This, say it again, that's the nave. Okay? What's that word obviously related to? Navy. Okay? Navy. Why? Because this is a journey. It's taking you someplace. Okay? The someplace it's taking you is here, and what that altar, so to speak, represents. So it's the idea that life is a journey and there is a destination. You're going to see the same thing when we get to Shakespeare, Shakespeare's sonnets. Okay. So, I endured hard heartache, come to know many of care's dwellings on the keel of a ship. As the ship bounces around, rides with the ocean. Terrible tossing of the waves, where the anxious night watch often held me at the ship's stem when it crashes against the cliffs. Notice, the anxious night watch. Well, where is the speaker sitting in this ship? He's in the bow. Why? What comes up in the next line? The crashing of the waves against the cliffs. He's keeping an eye out to make sure they don't crash against the cliffs. Okay? He says that he has the night watch. Does that imply that there are necessarily others on the ship? That it's a longer ship? A big ship? It might, but not necessarily. It could also imply that he's in a single-person boat like the Wanderer was, but he's also out there day and night, and it's at night that he has to keep the night watch in the bow. Why? Because it's a lot harder to see those cliffs than it is during the day. Pinched with cold were my feet, bound by frost and cold fetters. Why? Okay, it's cold. Why would his feet be bound by frost? I mean, literal frost? No, not literal frost. Not literally in the sense of how we know frost forms. Okay? Why not? Well, what's going to be the body temperature of his skin? Above 32 degrees. Frost has got to get 32 degrees. Temperature's got to get 32 degrees for frost to form. Okay? So, what does he mean, bound by frost? He might mean it metaphorically. He might mean it in another way, literally. What is frost a form of? Ice. Okay? Where is he? Okay, he's north, probably. If we're assuming that the speaker is an Anglo-Saxon, which I think it is safe to assume, what's that mean? He's either in the Irish Sea, between Britain and Ireland, or he's in the North Sea, okay, which is even colder. Possibly he's in the English Channel, which still isn't that warm. Okay? What else? Have you ever been in a rowboat? Or a small canoe? Or kayak even, and been on a river? No matter how hard you try, what still happens? Water gets in the boat. Okay? I think what's being suggested here is water is in the boat and his feet are resting in those water, in that water. Okay? Is it literally freezing? Probably not. Is it cold? Yes. Okay? Pinched with cold were my feet, bound by frost and cold fetters, while cares seethe hot around my heart. Notice the juxtaposition. His feet are freezing, while his heart is what? Seething, boiling, if you want, or burning. Okay? Is he talking about fever? No, he's not. He's talking about sorrow. and distress. Notice, the sorrow and distress doesn't do anything for his extremities. It doesn't actually warm him up at all. While care seethed hot around my heart, and hunger gnawed my sea-weary mind. Okay? So, his feet are cold, which is probably implying the rest of him is cold as well. His body is enduring hardship. Okay? His heart is full of cares and troubles. And what else? Hunger gnawed at his mind. How does hunger gnaw at the mind? What should hunger gnaw at? The belly, right? So why is it gnawing at his mind? Okay, what else?
Maybe he's not necessarily hungry for food.
Okay, maybe it's not food. It's possible.
Hungry for knowledge or resolution.
Desire for something else. Okay, very possible. Have you ever been so hungry that food is all you think about? Okay. Well, if you do ever have that experience, you'll know exactly what he's talking about. Notice he doesn't say like the wanderer. The one who's experienced this will understand. Okay? He doesn't say that for a reason, because he's going to juxtapose his own experiences with the experiences of, let's call them, landlubbers. People on terra firma. Okay? That man does not know. Who? He whose lot is fairest on land. The person who has everything going for him on the land does not know. Does not know what? How I dwelt all winter, wretched with care, on the ice-cold sea, in the paths of exile. It's the exact same term we heard in The Wanderer, the Raklastas. Okay? But the paths of exile are on the sea. Okay? So where's he exiled from? His homeland? Possible. Where else might it be? He's on the ocean, so what's he not on?
Land.
Exiled from the land. Okay? How could that be significant? What does the idea of land suggest? Stability. It doesn't move. Well, unless you're in an earthquake, but it doesn't usually move. I'm from California. Earthquakes are, born and raised in California, been in 6.5 earthquakes. Yeah, they shake, rattle, and roll, but you live with them, okay? It's the 7 and the 8s and the 9s you don't live with anymore, okay? He probably hasn't experienced an earthquake. They are very seldom in the United Kingdom or in Great Britain, okay? So, wretched with care on the ice-cold sea in the paths of exile, deprived of dear kinsmen. Notice your gloss. A half line may be missing here. Why? Because it doesn't have the proper alliteration. Okay? It doesn't have the proper meter. There aren't 4 stressed syllables. If there is half a line missing, we have no idea what it should be. Okay? This poem, like most Old English poetry, exists in one copy. Cadman's Hymn exists in multiple copies. Okay? This poem, one copy. Deprived of dear kinsmen, hung with icicles of frost, while hail flew in showers. Okay? What is hung with icicles of frost? What's the subject of this long, complex sentence? I hung with icicles of frost. What's he mean? He's got ice hanging from him. Okay? If you've searched the internet, you can find tons of pictures like this. Guys with long beards who've been out in the cold weather, and their beards become what? Caked with frost. Eyelids, eyebrows, become caked with ice. Okay? That's what he's talking about. Why? Because he's on these paths of exile when? Not summer. Winter. Okay? Have any of you ever experienced freezing fog? Yeah. Driven in freezing fog? It's not fun to drive in. Because as the fog forms, it immediately freezes on the ground. Black ice. Can't see it. You don't know it's there. Okay? Sometimes it freezes on the windshield of your car. And as you're driving, you turn your wipers on and they just don't do anything at all as the fog gets thicker and thicker. Well, if you're out at sea during the winter, okay, and it's cold enough, that fog freezes to anything it comes into contact with, like the side of a boat or a body in a boat. Okay? Because he's not sitting here patting himself to keep warm. So the question becomes, why is he in exile? Why is he on the sea in winter? I heard nothing there on the sea, but the noise of the sea, the ice-cold waves. The wild swan song, sometimes served for music. The gannet's call and the curlew's cry for the laughter of men. The seagull singing for mead drink. What in the world is he talking about? Okay. He's just named several birds. And what does he ascribe to them? What does he say the birds served as for him? Music. What else? Laughter.
Alcohol.
Okay. Mead. Where do you get music, laughter, mead?
The hall.
In the hall. In the hall. Okay. There's that idea again that we talked about the other day. The hall. The hall is the center or locus, if you want, of Anglo-Saxon life. It is everything. Okay? So when a Lord's hall is destroyed, that kind of implies, metaphorically, the people are destroyed. Even if the people aren't all destroyed. Okay? What would have been the effect? Just speculation. What would have been the effect if on 9/11, 2001, that flight that was taken down over the fields of Pennsylvania wasn't taken down and instead did hit the Capitol? I mean the Capitol. Or let's say even the White House. What if either the Capitol building or the White House had been destroyed? What would have been the psychological impact? As opposed to a single plane going down into a field in Pennsylvania. It would have been huge. How big was the psychological impact of the Pentagon getting hit? Pretty big. The two towers coming down. For those of us who remember the two towers going up. Huge. Okay. The White House, it survived the War of 1812. It's been around a while. Okay. The Capitol survived the War of 1812. Survived the burning of Washington. Okay. And if they had been taken out, huge. So those are our kind of modern versions of the hall. Keep in mind, it's the hall where the king or chieftain reigns. It's where the king or chieftain distributes treasure. His throne, you'll see when we get to Beowulf, his throne is called the giftstord or yiftstord. Gift, literally, stool or seat. It's the seat from whence he dispenses gifts, treasure. That's why the Lord is called the gold friend. He's the friend who gives gold. Okay? What else is it? It's the seat where justice is administered. If two of his thanes have a beef against each other, they go to the king or the Lord to have that justice resolved or to have that problem resolved. Okay? So, I mean, this is pretty important. And he's saying here that he hears and sees these birds, and what are they doing for him? They're taking the place of this. Because he doesn't have one anymore. He is like the wanderer, lordless, seemingly. Okay? Important to throw that in. Seemingly. Storms beat the stone cliffs. The tern answered, icy feathered. The eagle screamed, dewy feathered. No sheltering family could bring consolation to my soul. So we hear the swan, the gannet, the curlew, the seagull, the tern, the eagle, but no other human voices. That's why he says, no sheltering family could bring consolation to my desolate soul. And the word there for consolation, I'm pretty sure, this is what, line 26, should be frovra. Yep. Okay. Frovra. It's this idea of solace, respite, even. Okay? And so, now notice your footnote, because in the Old English you get a whole bunch of these phrases. Forthon, which can be translated a variety of ways depending upon its context. Okay? Your footnote says, the repeated connecting word forthon is notoriously difficult in this poem. It points forwards and or backwards, meaning either therefore or thus or because. In a poem whose logical progression is by no means clear or easy to follow, this is a significant source of ambiguity. So he says, I've chosen to render it with the vague and so. Why not just render it with, like he does weird in The Wanderer, with weird? Why not just render it with forethought and let the reader, since he's explained how it works, supply the meaning him or herself? Anyways, so is it therefore? Therefore, he who has tasted life's joy in town, suffered few sad journeys, scarcely believes? Or is it because he who has tasted life's joys in towns, suffered few sad journeys, scarcely believes? See the distinction between the two? And so, he who has tasted life's joy in town, suffered few sad journeys, scarcely believes, proud and puffed up with wine, what I, weary, have often had to endure in my seafaring. So, the juxtaposition again. The person in town, not just on land, okay, but in town, who has what? Suffered few sad journeys. Why? Where has the person stayed? In town. Okay? It's often thought, and there's pretty good reasons to think so, that most Anglo-Saxons didn't move beyond a 5 or 10 mile radius of where they were born. I think I read something, in fact, when I was in London this summer. It says something like, it was some fairly good sized percentage of the population doesn't move beyond about an 8 mile radius of where they're born. United States, we get up and move all the time. Okay? But there are parts of England, you go to small towns in England, and people whose families have literally lived there for centuries. Okay? Suffered few sad journeys. This person what? Scarcely believes. That is, they find it hard to believe. Why? Because they're proud and puffed up with wine. Doesn't mean they're drunk. What does he mean? Proud.
They haven't had someone bear this hard.
Okay. The wine has kind of taken the edge off of life for them. They scarcely believe what I, weary. What is that one word, weary? physically and mentally. It's exhaustion. And yet it's not exhaustion to the point where you collapse. You're exhausted, and yet you keep on going. Okay? In a World War I poem written by Wilfred Owen, Dulce et Decorum Est. Highly recommend looking it up. Okay? He talks about soldiers being weary, knock-kneed, marching while asleep. Right? That's pretty weird. And we know this actually happened. We've got written, documented account of soldiers asleep, and yet their bodies are still moving. Why? Because of the sheer repetition of it. Muscle memory, that kind of stuff. So, what I've often had to endure in my seafaring, he hasn't told us why he's seafaring. Other than that, he's an exile of some sort. The night shadow darkened. That is, nightfall came. Snow came from the north. Frost bound the ground. Hail fell on earth, coldest of grains. And so, forth on, therefore, because, whichever one it is, they compel me now. What's the they? He's going to tell us in the next half line. My heart thoughts. Notice, heart thoughts, not mind thoughts. What's the difference between this and this? Yes, this is reason. Okay. What's the heart? Passion. Okay. My heart thoughts, that is, the promptings of my heart, do what? Let's kind of change the syntax around a little bit. My heart thoughts compel me now to try for myself the high seas, the tossing salt streams. What does that mean? To try for myself. What does this verb mean? To try. Louder? To test. That's exactly what it is. Okay? To try and to test are related. Both come out of the medieval alchemical tradition. Okay? Like a test tube. Okay? What are you doing in a test tube? You are trying whatever the material is in there. You are proving it. Even the word prove or proof also comes out of that alchemical tradition. Okay? So, why is he trying for himself the high seas, the salt streams? What does that mean? How many of you, if any, watched any of the Olympics? Some of you did. Okay. What's that guy's name? I'd never heard of him before. Saw one of the bazillion commercials.
Michael Phelps.
No. That's a name you can't forget. No, the American, decathlon. Ashton Eaton. Never heard of him before. See, I'm old enough. I think American decathlon, Bruce Jenner, 1976. Okay. Junior high school counselors, I can't remember. There's a connection with my junior high school, Bruce Jenner. His mother-in-law was junior high counselor, kind of a thing. Okay? So, I've got Bruce Jenner in mind. I've never heard of Ashton Eaton. And then I saw, gold medal winner from 2012, and then he won it again this year. How come he isn't as famous as Bruce Jenner was in 1976 was? Or as, remember his first name, Spitz was in the 72 Olympics. Or Michael Phelps was in Name Your Olympics, kind of thing. Because you think about what the decathlon is. That's a lot of sports, okay? It's 10. And what is a decathlete doing? I don't mean literally, the sports. What does a marathon runner do? I used to run marathons. Or an ultra marathon runner. Those crazy people. We've got one in Murfreesboro. He's run, I think, 7 or 8 of these. Crazy people who ran the Badwater Ultra Marathon in Southern California. They run it from Death Valley, lowest point in the continental United States, to the top of Mount Whitney, the highest point in the continental United States. You're talking about a 15,000-foot climb. And they do it first week of July. When Death Valley, when they're running on the highway in Death Valley, they have to change your shoes about every 4 or 5 miles because the rubber is melting. I think the hottest temperature they've begun the race in, actually they start at midnight when it's cool. But the hottest temperature it's been during one of these is like 125 degrees.
They're testing their ability.
Exactly. What are they testing? Themselves. He's not testing the waters. He's testing himself. He's proving himself. Okay? People say, why did you climb that mountain? Because it was there. Why did you run that race? To see if I could. Why did Michael Phelps, enter to see if he could? Or Mo Farah run the 10,000 and the 5,000. Okay? Those are damn hard races to run. Because 10,000 sounds like 6 miles. Well, that's long and slow. No, it's not. They're running the 10,000 at about a 4:25 pace. That's 4 minutes, 25 seconds per mile. For 6 freaking miles. Okay? And it's even faster for the 5,000. It's like a 4:02, 4:03. Pretty fast. They're proving themselves. So he says, his heart thoughts compel him to try for himself the high seas, the tossing streams. My heart's desire urges my spirit. Okay? His mode. To do what? Time and again, to travel. We're getting at what he means by being in exile. So that I might seek a foreign land somewhere far from here. How? On the ocean. Okay. What kind of foreign land? Why would he seek out a foreign land? Why would he leave his own land?
So you're dissatisfied or something?
Because he's dissatisfied or something. Okay? Remember what I said here about this idea of a journey? Okay? In the history of Christian architecture, this part of the church, the nave, represents here. Here. Life here. Okay? And this part of the church, where the altar is heaven. Okay? In the early tradition of the church, and it's still this tradition in the Orthodox Church, it's like Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, that's what I'm part of. It's still the tradition that the priest, almost always, throughout the Divine Liturgy, faces that way. Faces the altar. A lot of people say, oh yeah, but he has his back to the people. No, he doesn't. What he's doing is leading the people. Where? Here. From where? Here. What is this? Right here, it's our homeland. What is this? A foreign land. Okay? So what the poet is suggesting, and this isn't just my interpretation, this is the way this poem has often been written, is that the poet is talking about the journey on the boat. Okay? Literally. But metaphorically, he's talking about spiritual journey. From one land to another. Kind of like what the poet says in The Wanderer. This land is governed by what? What happens here? The poet says change. This land is governed by change, right? No 2 days are exactly the same. Nobody has the same day 2 days in a row, unless they're living in Groundhog Day, you know. What do? We suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as Hamlet calls them. We have high points and we have low points. We have high points and we have low points. Which is good, because what happens if we have life like this? It's flatline. It's being, you die, okay? That I might seek a foreign land somewhere far from here. And so, forthon, therefore, no man on earth is so proud in spirit, nor so gifted in grace, nor so keen in youth, nor so bold in deeds, nor so beloved of his Lord, that he never has sorrow over his seafaring. Okay, so notice what he's just said. No man is so proud in spirit, so haughty, so arrogant, if you want. Could also mean so courageous, so brave. Okay? Nor so gifted in grace, that is, has natural abilities and talents, God has favored him, so to speak. Nor so keen in youth, sharp-minded. Okay? Nor bold in deeds, that is, not just word, but has actually done deeds. Nor so beloved of his Lord. Like the Lord says, you're my right-hand man. Lord, lowercase, earthly hall Lord. Okay? That he never has sorrow over his seafaring. Seafaring here is a metaphor. For what?
Spiritual journey.
Spiritual journey? Life. Life, which does involve a spiritual journey. But he's saying, nobody has it so great that they don't suffer in this, or in these, Yeswinkbagum, these days of toil. That he never has sorrow over his seafaring. What? When he sees what the Lord might have in store for him. What is that line? How does that line work in connection, that clause I should say, work in connection with the rest of the sentence? Because the sentence begins, and so no man. What he's suggesting, okay, is that, turn it around. When he sees what the Lord might have in store for him, no man is so proud in spirit. If you turn it around, you get the meaning more clearly. If you see what God might have in store, then you don't become so full of yourself. Nor do you think you have such great gifts. Nor do you think you're so smart. Nor do you become so bold in deeds. Nor do you see yourself so beloved of your Lord. Why?
Just really stay humble, damnation.
Stay humble, exactly. Okay? Because all of these things are what compared to what the Lord might have in store. They're transient, right? Here, the wanderer says, life is fleeting, friend is fleeting, woman is fleeting, wife is fleeting, treasure is fleeting. Okay? He has no thought. The one, what? Who sees what the Lord might have in store for him, has no thought of the harp or the taking of rings. What does he mean he has no thought of the harp? Go back to Bede and Cadman. What's the purpose of the harp? Okay, there in the Yaber Shippa, it's to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. Let's have some fun. Let's sing. Okay? Why does he have no thought of the harp? What's going to happen to it?
Pass away.
It's going to pass away. It too will rot. Okay? Nor the taking of rings. No, not marriage. Yeah, the treasure from the Lord. The rings here, I could pull up images for you, are not these kinds of rings. He's talking about rings that go over your arm. Okay? That warriors would be given for great battles that they fought in, or for great warriors that they've killed. We're going to see when we get to the end of Beowulf. When Beowulf dies, sorry to give it up for you in case you're not familiar with the story. When Beowulf dies, okay, the poet tells us fairly early on, he takes a ring off from around his neck. Okay? The proper phrase for that is a torque. He takes this torque off from around his neck and puts it on Wiglaf's neck, indicating, you will be king after me. Okay? It's just another form of a crown. They're both circular. They both reside on or near the head. So, he won't care for the taking of rings, nor the pleasures of woman, that is, pleasures in women, nor joy in the world, nor anything else but the tumbling waves. He who hastens to sea always has longing. The one who sees what the Lord, notice, doesn't say has in store. It's what the Lord might have in store. This is the Drichten Lord God. Okay? He thinks what about all of these earthly pleasures? I can leave those. And so he does what? He hastens to sea. Why? To leave those pleasures behind. Those pleasures are pleasures of what? The land, the earth. Okay? So he instead goes off into the boat. What does he experience in the boat? Cold, frost, hunger, fear, sleep deprivation. Okay? The groves take blossom. That is, meanwhile, back on land, the groves take blossom. That is, the forests bloom. The cities grow fair. The fields brighten. The world rushes on. Time passes. All these, the blossoming groves, the fair cities, the brightening fields, all these urge the eager-hearted spirit to travel when one intends to journey far over the floodways. Floodways. Ocean. Okay? Even the cuckoo urges with its sad voice. Summer's guardian announces sorrow bitter in the breast hoard. How so? Well, when do the forests bloom and the fields brighten? Spring. And then you get the cuckoo. When is the cuckoo? Summer. What are we seeing? Time passing on. Time rushing on. You're going to see when we get to Shakespeare's sonnets, time is one of the themes that so moved Shakespeare. It's almost like, Jim Croce's Time in a Bottle. Like, if Shakespeare could, I want to bottle up time. I want to stop time. But none of us can. He does not know who, the man blessed with ease, what those endure who walk most widely in the paths of exile. But who are those who walk most widely in the paths of exile? Is he talking about literal exiles? No, he's not. He's talking about those who choose those paths. And so now, forth on, therefore, because now my thought flies out from my breast. My spirit moves with the sea flood, roams widely over the whale's home, to the corners of the earth, and comes back to me greedy and hungry. Is this some kind of Shirley MacLaine-ish astral projection? He's going outside of his body, he's going to visit you. No, it's not what he means. He means he kind of sends his spirit out, and it comes back what? Greedy. Hungry. Why? Hasn't been fulfilled. As Bono famously put it in one of U2's biggest hits, I still haven't found what I'm searching for. Okay? That's exactly what that line means. The lone flyer cries out. A bird, okay, incites my heart irresistibly to the whale's path over the open sea. Okay? What does he mean? I think it partially depends on what kind of person you are. Are you a mountain person or are you a beach person? My wife, who grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, she's a beach person. I grew up in California, half hour away from Santa Cruz, 4 hours away from Yosemite, but I'm a mountain person. I could live in the Rockies and never see the ocean again. My wife would wither up and die if she never saw the ocean again. Okay? The lone flyer cries out. It's like the sound of the seagull. If you're familiar with The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien, it's the sound that elves are not supposed to hear, because once they hear the sound of the ocean, they're drawn to it. They're drawn to go across the ocean to the other side. Okay? The cry of this lone flyer does what? It calls out to me. It incites my heart irresistibly to the whale's path over the open sea. It says, time to go. Pack up. Because harder to me are the joys of the Lord than this dead life. Lana, it's the Old English word used there, on land. Harder to me are the joys of the Lord than this dead life. Okay? How are they hot? That is, they're life-giving. They are warming. And yet, what does he experience when he's out on the ocean? Freezing cold. Okay? I will never believe that earthly goods will endure forever. Always, for everyone, one of three things hangs in the balance before its due time. Okay, what does he mean before its due time? Okay. So what are one of the three things? Illness, or age, or what else? Attacked by the sword. Wrests life away from one doomed to die. The doomed there, the Old English word is faya, which is kind of like fated. Okay? Here's what you have to look forward to here on land, with all of your nice things surrounding you. Your cell phones, your computers, your TVs, your couches, your beds. You have either illness or age or attacked by the sword. In other words, death's coming to get you. Okay? Sometimes it's slow and you can't hear it. Sometimes it's fast. And it's galloping up behind you and you're trying as hard as you can to get away. And death comes up and, takes your legs out from under you. Kind of a cheery outlook, right? And so, therefore, forth on, because, for every man the praise of posterity, those coming after, is the best eulogy. Those coming after. What's he talking about?
Next generation.
Next generation. Fame. Glory. Okay? The praise of posterity, those coming after, is the best eulogy, the best good word. That before he must be on his way, he act what? Bravely on earth against the enemy's malice. Notice, the enemies, right? The definite article. Enemies is plural. He doesn't just say, act bravely on earth against enemies' malice. Why not? Why specify? What's the difference between this the enemy's malice and just enemies' malice? Okay.
The means you know where it's coming from. Like that. The enemies means like you know where it's coming from.
Exactly. Okay. Are the enemies defined in this line? No, they're not. Okay. Exactly. Whereas this is, it could be any enemy you have. Person who takes your parking spot. Okay. Person who cuts you off on the highway. Person who takes your job. Okay. Could be anything. The enemy's malice is referring to a specific set of enemies. And then he says, do bold deeds to beat the devil. See, the way I read the enemies, it's the devil and his quote-unquote minions. Or the way St. Paul puts it, the world, the flesh, the devil. Those three together. Not the world, generally construed. Like trees aren't your enemy. Okay? What does St. Paul mean by that? He means kind of the desires of the world. The desire for fame and all that. Okay? So, do bold deeds to beat the devil. How do you do bold deeds to beat the devil? You go find a devil worshiper and beat him up? Convert? Possibly. Louder. Evangelize? Possibly. What else? See, this is something else that's completely, not completely, almost completely lost in modern Christianity. This idea of what's called asceticism, or not F, ascetic feats, self-control. What is an example of an ascetic feat? Not these things. Fasting, praying,
Knowing the word of God so you can combat it.
okay, giving alms to the poor. How is giving alms to the poor an ascetic feat? What are you doing?
You're not using it for yourself.
Yes, you're not using that money for yourself. Okay? Fasting means you're telling yourself when you're hungry, no, you're not hungry. I can go without eating. What's the difference between that and I need to run this 22-mile run today in preparation for that marathon in 4 weeks? There's no difference at all. Because when I used to run marathons, I'd get up on the morning of a long run, and part of me would go, hell no, I don't want to run 22 miles today. Other part of me, I loved 22-mile runs, okay? Because during that whole time, I would pray, just the entire time, okay? That's kind of an example, or those are kind of examples of doing bold deeds to beat the devil. Because what does, kind of classically understood within Christianity, what does the devil want you to do? Go ahead. Let's pick on Nike. Just do it. Just do it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about the hangover. Drink those 12 bottles of beer. Finish off that fifth of scotch. Eat that pie, the entire one, you know? Smoke that joint. Do that coke. Sleep with all those people, whoever they are. Okay? Binge watch 13 hours of Lost, you know? I know, that's too close to home. My daughter will watch this and she'll say, okay, Dad, no, stop. That's just, you know. Okay? Do bold deeds to beat the devil. Why? So the sons of men will salute him afterwards. Not the devil, but the person doing the bold deeds. Okay? So notice, what kind of fame is he talking about? Exactly. Not George Patton's fame. Okay? Patton was a great general. He's way up here on my hero kind of list. But not that kind of fame. So what kind of fame? I think he's talking about those folks. Okay? Yesterday was the feast day of St. Aidan of Lindisfarne, the guy who founded the holy monastery of Lindisfarne. Okay? Every day of the year is a feast day of a saint. Why? Somebody who did bold deeds. Just last Sunday in the Orthodox Church, it was the feast day of St. Moses the Black. He's also called St. Moses the Ethiopian. Okay? Lived in the 4th or 5th century. Lived for the early part of his life. He was big. Think Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. Big, built, powerful, and he was a thoroughly rotten person. He was a murderer. He was a rapist. He was a robber. Why is this?
It must have changed.
Because he went to rob a monastery and was converted in the monastery. And he told the monks, I want to join you. They're like, maybe you should go to that monastery over there, you know. And he converted. Okay? In order to convert, he had to prove to them. They wouldn't let him in. He slept outside the monastery door until they let him in. Okay? His Saints' Day is the day, Saints' Days are commemorated on the days the saints die. He died when his old band, many, many years later, came to raid the monastery he was at. He sent the other monks away. He said, I have to stay. Why? He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. This is my death coming. Okay? Why is he a saint? Because of what he did afterwards. It's the idea everybody can change. This is the fame that the poet is talking about. And praise thereafter, live with the angels forever and ever in the joy of eternal life, delight among heaven's host. Now, shouldn't the poem end there? I mean, that's pretty good. Do battle against Satan, win great fame, and live forever with God and the angels in heavenly bliss. The days are lost. In other words, the poet's kind of saying, time's up. Time's up. And all the pomp of this earthly kingdom, that is, all the pomp, all the ceremony, all the fanfare, all the Air Force Ones are lost. They're gone. They're not worth anything. There are now neither kings, nor emperors, nor gold givers, as there once were. Notice the language that's being used. I think the word for kings, I'm not going to pull it up because it'll take too long. I think the word for kings there is actually Caesars. Okay? Not positive, but I think it is. So what's he mean? The poet is bringing in classical world leaders. Why? Because he's saying there aren't any leaders in any cultures. what? As there once were. The poet is saying, guys, the leaders we have today, they just don't hold a candle to, let's say, the leaders of 200 years ago, or 400 years ago, or however many years ago. When they, who? Kings, gold givers, emperors, what? Did the greatest glorious deeds and lived in most lordly fame. He's probably thinking of people like David, Samson, okay? Maybe Caesar, but all this noble host is fallen. Noble, princely. Okay? He doesn't mean royal. He means princely, aristocratic, high kind of standing. All this noble host is fallen. Their happiness lost. And what remains? The Old English is rearser. The worser ones remain and rule the world. Not about you, but if I'm a king and some poet in my kingdom's writing this, I'm going to be calling them up and say, what do you mean the worser ones are the ones remaining? What are you saying about me? The weaker ones remain and rule the world, laboring and toiling. Joy is laid low. That is, joy isn't real. The earth's nobility grows old and withers like every man throughout Middle Earth. Nobility, the good blood, so to speak. Old age overtakes him. His face grows pale, the gray beard grieves. He knows his old friends, offspring of princes, have been given up to the earth. It's like if you saw, there was a link on Drudge the other day. Some guy in Malaysia or Thailand, I can't remember where, maybe the Philippines, 145 years old. He's 145. Okay? According to his identification card, pretty sure it's Malaysia. They've got proof. He was born in 1870. Okay? Or 1880, I can't remember which it is. 1880, 1870, I think it is. Okay? He's really, really old. And he's like, I'm ready to die. Why? All of his children are dead. All of his friends are dead. His great-great-grandchildren are alive. And his great-great-great-grandchildren are alive. Okay? And he's just kind of like a Timex watch. He just keeps on going. He knows his old friends, offspring of princes, have been given up to the earth. When his life fails him, his fleshly cloak, that is, his body, his flesh, will neither taste the sweet nor touch the sore, nor move a hand, nor think with his mind. In other words, when his life fails him, what's going to happen to his body? It's going to fall to the ground and do what? Nothing. Why? Because dead men don't feel. Dead men don't think. Dead men don't taste sweet stuff. Though a brother may wish to strew his brother's grave with gold, what does he mean? To bury him with gold. Bury him among the dead with heaps of treasure to take with them. Now, this probably indicates that this poem, even though it's inscribed in a manuscript around 1000 AD, it very likely comes from much earlier than that. I think it's probable that the genesis of this poem could go back to 700 or so. Why? Because he's talking about Anglo-Saxon pagan burial practices. Burying somebody, putting gold in the grave. Why? So they can use it on the next journey. So they can use it in the next life. What's the poet or speaker saying? That gold will be useless before the terror of God for any soul that is full of sin. the gold he had hidden while here on earth. Notice, the speaker is suggesting the gold that will be buried with him is gold that he will have kept hidden while here on earth. Okay, so what's wrong with that? Y'all have bank accounts. You don't just walk around with your gold, right? I mean, dollar bills in your arm, coming out of your pockets, and
Maybe
no.
an indication that he's not doing good with it. He's not-
Bingo. What is the purpose of gold? To help others. What is the mark of a good Lord? He distributes the wealth. He shares or deals it out. It's when you hoard that gold that you become dragonish. Okay? Every dragon in Anglo-Saxon literature, there's not many, only two really. Every dragon in Germanic literature, we say, that expands their frame a little bit more, is really nothing but an overzealous, greedy accountant. Because they know every piece of gold in their hoard. That's why you steal one little stinking piece of gold, the dragon's going to get all bent out of shape. Okay? In Beowulf, a guy steals a cup. The dragon gets all bent out of shape, destroys Beowulf's land. The Hobbit, Bilbo steals one little cup. That's where Tolkien gets it from. Okay? And Smaug does what? He goes, you know what, crazy. He comes out, he torches the whole area. Okay? Why? You took one of my pieces. You took a penny from me. It's my penny. I want it back. Everybody dies until I get my penny. Okay? I mean, that's how bad it is. Why? Because dragons are symbolic of avarice. Avarice. Okay? Redex malorum est cupiditas. The root of all evils is cupidity or avarice. It's not love of money. It's greed. Greed is different than love of money. Okay? Making a good wage, making a good earning is not sinful, in other words, according to the kind of the language of the church or even the language of the poem. It's making that good money and hoarding it, not using it, let's say, appropriately. So, great is the terror of God before which the earth trembles. He established the sturdy foundations. Okay, you see how I said early on, this poem was more overt in its Christianity than the Wanderer? The Wanderer doesn't get into this, preaching like the Seafarer does. I mean, he's on a roll now. He's on his soapbox. He's got his Bible out, and he's going to... Great is the terror of God, before which the earth trembles. He established the sturdy foundations. Just read the Psalms, and it says he established the sturdy foundations. Or, in the beginning, God. The earth's solid surface and the high heavens. Foolish is he who dreads not the Lord. Death will find him unprepared. What does he mean, unprepared?
His soul is not ready.
Yeah. Why? Because he doesn't fear the Lord. Okay? The psalmist and the writer of Proverbs says the beginning of wisdom is what? Fear of the Lord. What does that mean? You should really fear God? Shouldn't want to meet God, so to speak? It's not really what's being implied. It's fear of death. Because death is the time when you, quote unquote, meet your maker. Okay? Foolish is he who dreads not the Lord. Death will find him unprepared. So, what must one do before death? prepare. You must prepare for death. Okay? How do you do that? Blessed is he who lives humbly. There's one way. What else? Mercy from heaven comes to him. If you live humbly, what does it mean to be humble? Not prideful? Modest? Does it mean, oh, I'm the worst person who ever lived? No, it's not that. Okay? But it might mean, if you are the worst person who ever lived, to acknowledge that you are the worst person who ever lived. It means to see yourself. Okay? I used to teach a course in fantasy literature, and in that course, I taught the book The Sword of Shannara, which is just crap. It's complete knockoff of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, okay? With one little twist, and I'm going to give it away, so sorry. The sword, in the Sword of Shannara, everybody thinks, oh, it's going to be this great weapon we can use to defeat the Skull King. But it's not. What the sword actually becomes is kind of like what this thing is right now if you were to look at it. What do you see? What do you see? If you look into the glass.
Myself?
Yeah, exactly. It's a mirror. And what the sword does is the person who picks up and wields the sword has got to be strong enough to see himself as he really is. What does that mean? All the flaws. To acknowledge the flaws and to accept them. To accept one's weaknesses. Because we don't generally like to do that. I'm not weak there. I can handle that. And push it down, No, to acknowledge all of that. So, mercy from heaven comes to him who lives humbly. Humbly ultimately is one thing: putting others before yourself. Whether that's, you're going to donate for Live Aid, or you're going to donate for somebody who lives on the other side of the world, or giving up that parking spot to somebody else. Yeah, see, that just brings it down to home. Or letting somebody else get that last movie ticket. Or stopping on the roadside and giving somebody $5 who's hungry. Or buying, even better, buying them a hamburger and giving it to them. What? The Maker strengthens his spirit, for he believes in his might. Notice how that works. The Maker, God, strengthens the humble person's spirit. Why? Because what does the humble person do? Denies him or herself. Okay? And what happens when you deny yourself? Yeah, you might start to get hungry. You might start to get a little depressed, etc. That's why Lent in both the Catholic and Orthodox churches is what? It's not merely, well, I got to give up, sex, or I got to give up booze or smoking or whatever. It's control. It's self-control. So we don't like to practice self-control. We like to just, I want, give me. I want mine. Okay? Look at a 2-year-old. Humanity in a nutshell. Okay? So the Maker strengthens his spirit, for he, the person whose spirit is strengthened, what? Believes in his might. Believes in God's might. That is, he believes that God is able to do this. Notice what that presupposes. God exists. Okay? A man must steer a strong mind and keep it stable. Okay, I'll get on to politics for just a... No, I won't go there. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. This is probably the number one problem Donald Trump has been having throughout this presidential election season. What? Steering his mind. Because he's like, oh, a rabbit, Ooh, an idea pops into my mind. Say it. Rather than, Hold, pause, think about it first. Okay, now, okay. A man must steer. What does that mean? How do you steer a horse? How? Reins connected to bridle and bit in the mouth, and what are you doing? You're steering that head. Okay? That's why St. James says, "Take the throw of this thing." Because this is the most dangerous thing a person has. It's the words. Okay? He must control a strong mind and keep it stable, steadfast in its promises. That is, you make a promise, you keep it, exactly. Pure in its ways. Every man must hold in moderation his love for a friend and his hatred for a foe. Why? Why? Why should I hold in moderation my love for a friend? What might that friend become? Okay, that's possible. Let's assume they don't. What else might that friend become? An idol. You set that friend up. What does every idol do? What does every person we put on a pedestal do? They get fall, they get knocked off, or sometimes they jump off. Both feet. Okay? Why not too much hatred for a foe? Okay, possibility a foe could become a friend. What else? Becomes consuming, this hatred.
It distracts from the enemies.
Could be distracting. What does the United States, as a country, do regarding our enemies in, say, World War II? How were Germans described? How were Japanese described? Japs. Juries. The Viet Cong in Vietnam, gooks. So what do? You dehumanize them. Why? Because if they're not human, you can kill them willy-nilly. Okay? Though he may wish him full of fire, that's talking about eternal damnation. I think the poet is actually even suggesting we shouldn't really wish that on anybody either. Okay? Fate is greater, the maker mightier than any man's thoughts. In other words, we don't know what God has in store for anybody else. So, let us consider where we should have our home. Notice, the tone of these last lines, different in many respects from the rest of the poem, seems to place the poem finally in a homiletic setting. The exhortation of a preacher rather than the confession of a weathered ancient mariner. I don't know about you, but it seems to me that, since about line 72, it's been pretty homiletic. I mean, he's been saying, turn away from sin, turn to God, live a good life, be a holy person, don't seek earthly fame per se, seek this kind of fame. Okay? So where should we have our home? And then think how we might come there. What's he mean? Think of the foreign land you should be looking for. And then think, how do you get there? How do you get from point A to point B? That's the doing the bold deeds against the devil. Okay? And let us also strive to reach that place of eternal peace. That is where we should have our home. Unending blessedness, where life is found in the love of the Lord, hope in heaven. Thanks be to the Holy One that he has so honored us, ruler of glory, eternal Lord, throughout all time, and he passes the collection plate, So how does this poem read? Sermonizing somewhat. Do you think that this poem could be used kind of in an evangelistic sense? Appealing to quasi-pagan people or people whose Christianity is kind of young and fresh and part of them really does want to go out and kill their enemy, and the poet says, well, okay, let's think about that. Maybe that's not the best way to... Okay? Yeah, I think it possibly is a tool for proselytizing. Okay? Keep in mind, what was the importance of Cadman? He takes that native Germanic form and he adapts it for Christian purposes. What's the reason? So that that poetry could then be used, let's say, to adapt pagan Germans. Okay? Or quasi-Christian Anglo-Saxons and help kind of bring them more fully into the faith. All right, we'll stop there. Dream of the Rood for Tuesday. Little bit less preachy, but not much.